Greetings and welcome to another episode of Going All In, Get the Edge You Need to Succeed. I'm Dr. Erin McKinley, and today we're at home doing a different episode since we don't have a spotlight session scheduled for this week. And so actually I'm working on props for a LSU Homecoming event that we do in the College of Ag called What the Hay, where we decorate hay bales, very ag, to match the homecoming theme and then to match agriculture and the theme of whatever our club is. So the Student Nutrition and Dietetics Association is the student club here at LSU, and we are reigning, defending two-time champs of said hay bale. And so you can see behind me, this year's theme is There's No Place Like Homecoming. So everything is Wizard of Oz themed. And so I am just here at home finishing up some crafts before we finalize and decorate everything. And I'll definitely keep you posted on how we did this year. So I'm actually going to try to paint and talk at the same time. So we'll see how well this goes. But while we were working on crafts for this event this year, I actually had a really interesting conversation with one of my non-traditional students in dietetics. So someone who isn't of your typical college age, like 18 to 22, 23. And they expressed concern about the struggle of going back to school after you've been working for a while and you have more of that structured adult life. And now that one is back in school, you can't work full time because you have to manage a full-time class load. And obviously, if you're not working full time, you're not bringing in the same income that you were before. And so you have to really make those adjustments to your standard of living as far as what you are able to bring in and what you need to pay bills and whatnot. And so the student had expressed concern that it was weighing on them, that they weren't able to maintain the level of, their lifestyle that they were accustomed to before they came back to school, and it was starting to kind of weigh on them and stress them out a little bit. So this conversation really reminded me of myself when I decided to go back to school, and that real big change in my lifestyle from working full time to being that traditional quote unquote broke grad student. And so when I was going back to school to become an RD, and a few months from finishing my DI and my MS, I had been doing that for almost 3.5 years at that point, since I took such a non-traditional route. And my research mentors for my master's had approached me about continuing on and completing a PhD. And my first reaction to that was, no, I just want to go back to being an adult. So I was about to turn 30, and I really just wanted to go back to work, have that full-time income, have health insurance and benefits and all of that stuff. I thought that I had done enough of the legwork. I was successfully finishing my master's, was about to finish my internship. I didn't have any worries about passing the RD exam. I didn't have any concern with not being able to get a job. I was flexible with my living location. And so I was pretty confident that things would work out pretty well after graduation. And so I really just didn't want to stay in that mode any longer of not having that much of an income and still being in school and all that comes with it. And I had taken out a significant amount of student loans in order to make this a reality for myself, to become an RD. So I knew that it was only a matter of time before that would kick in as far as loan payments would go. And so I really just wanted to get started on paying those back and moving past that as best that I could. And so when the student had mentioned this struggle and how they just wanted to feel like an adult, it definitely just resonated with me. And I connected to it immediately to be able to kind of talk about my story a little bit and where I've come from and how I felt that exact way. And for those that have figured out, I did stay and get my PhD. And so that took a lot of soul searching and an offer I couldn't refuse. But I definitely understand where students are coming from, where they just really feel like they just want to go back to being an adult. And I also see it a lot in my undergrads who are of traditional college age, who can't wait to get there. They can't wait to actually become an adult once they graduate and get that job. And so I completely can understand both sides of it. I definitely felt that way when I was leaving business school. As an undergrad, I just wanted to get on my own feet, have my own income, get my own place, all the things that we think about when we think about what it's like to grow up. So that being said, it dawned on me that I haven't really told my entire career changer story for the audience of this podcast. I gave a little bit of a brief overview of that in the very first episode, or kind of gave a little bit of background on myself, but I didn't really give a lot of detail or a lot of advice for those that are going through the same thing. So as a DPD director, I get a lot of emails every day. And I also get a lot of emails related to how to enter my dietetics program and how to get into the profession of dietetics, what the process is to become a dietitian. And I've noticed over the years that a lot of times the emails are from individuals who already have some sort of college degree. And some have a bachelor's, some might even have a master's degree. And oftentimes it isn't anything that is directly related to nutrition. Every once in a while, I might get something as far as like culinary arts or home economics, human ecology, things like that. But a lot of times it is completely different. And so I've seen that these individuals, through what they say in their emails, they had at some point this realization that they wanted to make a change in their career and in their life and go into nutrition. And they maybe did a little bit of a search on nutrition professionals, what types there are, and becoming a dietitian usually is what comes up in those Google searches. And so a lot of times they've discovered this newfound interest in nutrition. Maybe it was because they personally have something going on that they've had to manage medically or with nutrition therapy, and they've realized you can make a career out of that. Or maybe it was a child or a parent or a grandparent who had some sort of nutrition-related diagnoses, and they saw the importance of good nutrition for themselves through that person's journey. And then sometimes it's just out of a personal interest of they just wanted to get healthier for themselves, and they realized that they could make a living out of doing this and helping others. And a lot of times they just need a change and they just really like the area and they want to get into it to do that for their job and their career. So the other thing that I see with these individuals is that they definitely are not traditional college students, obviously, if they already have a degree. So they're going to be a little bit older. They've already been working somewhere. They have a lot of good experience that they're bringing to the table that they don't realize is transferable to our profession. So they're a little bit lacking assurance that they're making the right decision. So everybody knows that if you're watching this podcast, you know how difficult it is to get into this profession. Completing a DPD program is no joke. Doing an internship is no joke. Having to do a master's. And for those of us that went on and got a terminal degree, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time spent, a lot of energy, a lot of tears, a lot of everything. And so I think these individuals think that one must be young and have a lot of vigor to be able to get that done. And so some of these folks are in their 30s, 40s, maybe even more higher than that, their 50s. And a lot of times after a couple of emails back and forth or some sort of conversation over Zoom, I get asked, am I crazy for wanting to make this change? You know, is it crazy for me to go back to school at this age? When they realize the length of time sometimes it can take to go back and take those DPD classes and then do supervised practice and a graduate degree if they don't already have one, you know, they're adding those years to their current age and kind of thinking, you know, am I too old to even do this because I'll be such and such an age by the time I actually become a registered dietitian. Usually what happens with these conversations is that at some point I'm able to sort of reveal that I too am a career changer, and that I completely understand where they're coming from, and that you're not too old and you're definitely not crazy for wanting to get into a profession that a lot of people love. And it doesn't matter what your age is. If you can handle the amount of work that goes into completing everything that you have to do, and you're going to be happy at the end of the day, who cares how old you are? Who cares if you're sitting in a room full of a bunch of young folks? I remember being very weirded out about that myself, and you get over it after a little while, and it's not really something to focus on. So when I'm engaging with these folks who are emailing me to get more information about my program and for getting into the profession, once I reveal that I'm a career changer, they immediately want to know my story. They want to know how I made it. And I always feel like my story is not the normal type of story because I was a career changer or am a career changer. And so I do share that. Do I share all of it sometimes? No, I usually just kind of give the basics of how I kind of realized I wanted to come into this and where I went to school. And so a lot of times I feel once they hear a little bit of my story, it maybe calms their nerves a little bit, gives them a little bit of reassurance that they're making the right choice to do this, because they can actually see that I made it through and have done something with that. And now am in turn doing that for others and helping others get into this career. As you can tell, I'm painting Dorothy's shoes somewhat successfully right now. All right. Ooh, have you ever tried to outline something? It's very difficult. But I'm going to go ahead and share with y'all my career changer story. And so you can really hear what happened and how I came into this in full with all, well, maybe not all the details, but most of them. And so for those who may not have actually watched the first episode of this podcast, I went to business school. And so I went to Methodist University in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and got my bachelor's degree and double majored in business administration and marketing. And what I really wanted to do with that was go into the casino business. That was my main priority. Didn't really have any other interests other than that with regard to business and marketing. The business school that is at Methodist is very hospitality based. And so I was trained by some of the best folks in hospitality, some with ties to Vegas, some not, but that was the main goal. And my family had just recently, at the couple months before I graduated from college, had moved to Las Vegas full time. And so the expectation was to move out there as well. Where else was I going to go? There's a whole other story about where else I could have gone, but that's for another episode. So it was natural that I would go out to Las Vegas after I graduated. And when I graduated, honestly, I thought, I have a college degree. I can just walk into any casino and show them my resume and they'll give me a job. And I found out very quickly that that was not true. And was pretty much told that I had to get casino experience in order to get some of the jobs that I wanted, which were very entry level jobs. And you have that classic response of, how am I supposed to get experience if no one will hire me? So I really had to think outside the box as far as the skill set goes of working in a casino. And I went towards finance and banking first, since I had taken so many finance classes in my business school curriculum. It was not foreign to me, the aspect of money. And so I actually worked at a bank for an entire year before I was able to get my foot in the door at a casino working in gaming, and worked my way up and around and different properties, and gained through that time a ton of transferable skills. At the time, I did not know what that was. That transferable skills as a concept was not something that I was even thinking about. But I was accumulating all of this really awesome experience that I didn't really even at the time know how valuable it was. When I was kind of going from position to position, property to property, it was more, okay, I figured out how to do this. What's next? I wanted to try to learn how everybody's job was done, because I thought that's what was needed to really get into more of the leadership type positions that I was looking for. So it did take a little while, and worked my way up within one organization, and eventually became a corporate casino executive, and was actually connected to properties in Las Vegas, Colorado, Indiana, and Mississippi. And so a lot of that was right place at the right time. In addition to, I knew I could handle it. I'd worked so hard to get to that point. That was what I really, really wanted. And so during this time, it was the mid to late 2000s. And so the recession hit in about 2008. And to compare, for those that were not old enough to understand it, we're in the middle of COVID. Last year, we had lockdown where people were not allowed to go to casinos. So they had money, they just couldn't go and spend it. The recession was sort of similar, but the casino doors were wide open and no one had any money. So either way, casinos lost money, not bringing in revenue. And so that was what was happening around 2008. The room rates were dropping. I remember, for fun, staying at all the other hotels that were on Fremont Street in downtown Vegas for $18, $20, $25 a night. And I looked at it as research to see what the competition was doing, and to not, to get to have fun on a Friday night and not have to drive home, those sorts of things. And so that's how bad it was, that hotels were practically giving away rooms. You could get really great meals for next to nothing. We just weren't bringing in enough revenue. So when that happens in any situation, to keep the ship afloat, you got to get some people off the boat. And so a lot of people were laid off in different positions. And so within the casino that I was in, some of those positions were unionized. And so there was dealing with that. And I learned that as a skill, which was very interesting. But a lot of the upper level, almost all of your upper level management positions outside of food and beverage and housekeeping were non-unionized. And so they didn't really need any other reason to let you go other than we can't afford you anymore. And I was seeing people left and right in the offices around me suddenly not coming to work. And at that weekly staff meeting, that person's job get divvied up between a bunch of other people. And I started to absorb other people's job responsibilities because they were getting laid off. So after a while, you kind of start to think, okay, so when is it my turn? Am I important enough to not lay off? And so I joke that I wasn't ever sure if my keys were going to work in the door, if my security code was going to work to get upstairs in the casino, things like that. And so I really started to think about what was next. So shortly before the recession occurred, kind of one of the bigger catalysts that made me start thinking maybe there is something else out there. In March of 2007, when I was starting that awesome casino job that I've been talking about this whole time, I found out that I had cervical cancer. And so that was kind of a big blow to find out you got your dream job and you have cancer in the same week, like literally the same week. And so I had to schedule surgeries and appointments during those first couple weeks of my job. And I got really, really scared that I was going to lose my job because of it, since a very popular policy that's upheld in the casino business is the 90-day policy of we pretty much can let you go for any reason within the first 90 days of employment. If it's just not a good fit, we don't really have to give you a justifiable reason. If we don't want you, you're out. And so a lot of jobs, like benefits, don't kick in until after 90 days, all that stuff. And so I was afraid that since all of that was going to be happening in my first 90 days, that I might lose my job or not be able to keep it, or something bad happening. So I decided to keep it a secret as much as I could, and maneuvered as best I could, and got my surgeries and had all the stuff that came with it that I had to go through. I was able to hide it really, really well. The nice thing was that it was caught early, so I didn't have to go through a lot of the in-depth traditional treatments that come with having cancer. And so I wasn't losing my hair. I wasn't overly sick it seemed like a lot of that hit me more on the weekends when I would actually stop moving. And so it wasn't really affecting my ability to go to work every day. And so that happening in March of 2007, I was promoted to a corporate position in June of that year. So I started in March and was promoted up to the GM's office, the general manager's office in June. And then about beginning of 2008 was when my boss became the COO, and then therefore I moved up along with him to a corporate position. And so in 2007, I had taken on that summer a lot more responsibility. And then in about the end of August, when I was going for a checkup to really just make sure everything was fine, on the cancer front, more cancer was discovered. And so I almost had to redo everything. I decided to opt to not have surgery that time. That's a whole other story. And really started to think there's got to be a different way to go about dealing with cancer that doesn't involve surgery. And everything that I had been looking at was all related to integrative medicine, herbal medicine, natural healing. And I really like all of that stuff when you look at it from a lens of not being a professional or not being a dietitian. It was just intriguing. It's intriguing when you don't know the science behind it, or you haven't been trained in how to debunk it, so to speak. And a lot of it still has research that supports it. Maybe not at that time, but now in 2021, there's a lot more research going on. And so locally, I had found she was a certified health education specialist and a master herbalist who taught these weekend classes out at UNLV. And so UNLV has this like nights and weekends class schedule where pretty much anybody in the public can just sign up and go, and you pay the fee and you can have these cool classes. And so there was all these herbal medicine classes that were available, and just thought I would check it out. And after a couple of weeks of taking different classes and whatnot, started to see the same people over and over again. And you start to kind of chit chat more with the instructor. And she had invited me to an event that they were having for whatever, it was Herbal Medicine Day or something weird like that. And they were having this event out at this park in Henderson. And it was like, come meet all these other people, blah, blah, blah. So I had never really revealed to anybody that I was sick when I was going through that. I just was coming at it more from I want to improve my health, that sort of thing. Because I didn't want to reveal that and make it seem like at that time that's what I was there for. Eventually it did come out, and the teacher did start to do that annoying stuff of like, here's this herb, I think it would make your nausea go away. And it's like, please stop. But I went to this event at this park and was introduced to a bunch of other people in Las Vegas that were doing the same thing as far as teaching, and some have stores and some make their own herbal medicine stuff and have these retreats and all kinds of stuff. Farmers who grow the herbs and how to wildcraft things. And I learned that there was this person who still operates in Las Vegas. I still like her as a businesswoman, and I actually still buy some stuff from her now and have them shipped out to me. But she was telling the story about how she had cured her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma with echinacea. And so at that time, I was in such a vulnerable state as far as like mentally about my own health, that I was like, wow, if she can do that, I can too. Da, 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 da. And so I started really kind of buying into it. But then after the glitter faded, however you want to call it, really started to look at it through the lens of someone who went to business school, and was starting to think, okay, so these people are telling people to ingest and do all these things with herbs, and is that even legal? Is herbal medicine real medicine? How are these people not getting sued if they accidentally tell somebody to take this tincture or this capsule of a combination of herbs and it actually negatively affects their health in some way? Like, are they legally liable for this? Like a doctor? Do they have malpractice insurance? Like, I started to actually think like a business person who took way too many classes, law classes. And so that's when I started to look into, okay, so who are the legal people that are allowed to tell people what to eat and what to ingest and who would be held liable if something were to happen. And I wasn't seeing anything related to herbal medicine. I just started seeing this registered dietitian. And no joke, I had never heard of one. The whole time I was sick, no one ever suggested that I go see a dietitian because I wasn't having severe weight loss. I didn't look sick. I wasn't having a lot of issues with nausea and vomiting and diarrhea and not wanting to eat. I didn't have any of that. I was just kind of a different patient when it came to cancer. And so no one ever had recommended one. So I honestly never heard of one and never met one that I knew of. And so once I kind of figured it out, started to try to look up the process. And that is where I learned for myself how confusing that process is. And that's how I can relate to these people that email me, because the process, even though the Academy lays it out on their website, if you are not coming from that world, it's hard to interpret that information sometimes. I've been in it for over a decade now. So of course it's second nature. It makes complete sense to me now, but it didn't make any sense at all back in 2009. And so finally figured out, okay, I have to go to school. I have to go get a degree in nutrition, and I have to do some sort of internship. Okay, so UNLV has a dietetics program and an internship. And so I emailed the director and just kind of asked, and just like those students email me now, I was that person emailing her saying, hey, I already have this BS in business administration and marketing. I want to come back to school to become a dietitian. I probably spelled it wrong with a C, but I'm not thinking I did. Asked Dr. Wallace or Dr. Cresco Wallace, is it possible for me to come back and get a master's and then eventually do the internship and da-da-da? Because I didn't want to go back and get another bachelor's degree. I looked at that as that's pointless. I already have one. Why do I need another one? Not understanding how Ascend works or what Ascend is at that point. And so she emailed me back and was like, yeah, no, we don't prefer you to do that. If you were going to come to UNLV, we would prefer you enroll as a degree seeking student at the bachelor's level, take all of the DPD classes that you need, and then apply to the internship just like everybody else would upon graduation. So that wasn't the answer that I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, of course you can do your master's and and you don't need another bachelor's degree. It wasn't the news that I wanted to hear because I didn't understand the process. And so kept looking for programs. And so adding my lack of understanding of how the process worked, in addition to how not all dietetics programs websites clearly lay out everything that's needed. That's not throwing shade at any program in particular. We all have our own different website setups, and sometimes those are dictated by our universities, and we think we have all of the information covered on the website, but maybe something's hiding in a handbook and we just didn't direct people to the handbook. I was looking for the information that sounded good to me. And so that's where I found Alabama's program. So Alabama's had an online graduate program for quite a while now. And I was seeing what I wanted to see. You can get a master's. You can do it online. You can live wherever you want. Oh, great. I can stay in Vegas. I can do this online. I can get my master's. I still wasn't like 100% sure what the internship part was. I think with my understanding of UNLV, I thought it was maybe just something they required. I don't really remember at this point. So I just, instead of emailing anybody any questions at Alabama, I just decided to say, I'm just going to apply and see what happens. And I applied just like a normal grad student would. And I want to say like a week went by and my phone rings, and it's at the time the director of the nutrition program at Alabama. And she was like, oh yeah, da-da-da, little small talk. And then she's like, why did you apply to my program? And I was like, because I want to be a dietitian. And she was like, okay, honey, I don't think you understand how it works. And I was like, clearly I don't. And so she's like, you're coming from a background that has nothing to do with what you would need to learn for dietetics. Like, yeah, I can see on your transcript you took some science classes, but you didn't take science classes for science majors. And I was like, what is that? I went to such a small school. We didn't have the luxury of separating out biology and chemistry into science majors and non-science majors. And so I had never heard of that. I was like, okay, but I still took some science classes. Oh, you didn't take enough. You got to take. And she kind of started to verbally tell me how intense it was. And we had a conversation. I don't really remember the much more of the conversation other than at the end of it where she was like, you know what, I think I'm going to take a chance on you, and I think I'm going to let you into this program, and we're going to see how you do. But you need to go back. I'll let you in as a master's student, but you need to go back and you're going to have to take all of the undergraduate DPD classes at the same time. And of course, me not really understanding what that meant at the time either was like, oh, yeah, I'll do that. No problem. I don't care how long it takes. Thinking I'm going to do it all online. And so she sent me a little email and was like, check into some local universities about math classes. And chemistry, you might be able to take, anatomy, physiology, chemistry, biology, micro, all that stuff. You might be able to take it at a local community college or a local university, save yourself some money, use that in-state tuition, and then transfer it over. And I started to look into that, and the way that Nevada's Board of Regents has their degree program set up is that you can't take a chemistry class without pre or co-recking with the math, and you can't transfer the math in or something like that. It was pretty much anyone I had asked at different schools were like, no, you need to retake math. And I was like, I am not retaking math. I did not do that great in college. I am not a math person. I'm not a numbers person. Hindsight, hilarious. Figuring what I do for a living now. But I just refused to. And so I was like, well, I'm just not going to do that. I should just take everything through Alabama. So at this point, when I accepted admission to Alabama, going back to the casino job, things started to kind of start to go south a little bit faster there. And my worry about not being able to keep my job was increasing, a lot more drama, to the point where people were starting to sabotage each other's careers because they didn't want their head on the chopping block when the next round of layoffs came along. And I just wasn't happy anymore, and was just having situations where a lot of coworkers were just trying to set me up to look like the bad guy in situations. And I was just kind of tired of the drama. I was like the youngest person that worked at this casino, but the least traumatic, which was kind of funny. And so I made the conscious decision to exit that situation in about October of 2009, and was able to pretty quickly get into a chiropractic office. As I started out as a chiropractic assistant, so working the front desk, helping people get set up on therapies and getting them set up in the room, coding, billing, all kinds of stuff. And then they realized how quickly I learned things, and they kind of moved me more into taking over the manager's role of really doing the coding and billing, a skill I didn't realize I was going to need later on, and doing some more of the marketing stuff since that was my background. And so I was able to observe how a practice was operated and maintained by a family, the coding, the billing process, the appointments and scheduling, dealing with patients, dealing with HIPAA, dealing with insurance, all of it. I'm very thankful I was able to observe. And so by the time I started school in January of 2010, I started my first semester online. And as this was going on, I was in communications with that director from Alabama, and she was like, hey, consider, since you don't want to do the chemistries and biologies and transfer them in, have you considered just coming down to Alabama and just doing the program here? And so I had to think about that for a while, and decided to make a trip down there in about March of 2010. Did not tell my boss at the time that's why I was going down there. He knew I was in school. I made it seem like I had to go down there for like some sort of like important orientation session for my grad program. I don't remember exactly what I told him. And when I was down there, I met with that director, and she outlined everything for me and was like, these are the master's classes you're going to take each semester in with the undergrad classes. This is the semester in which you'll apply for the internship. This is when you would start the internship. And this is when you're going to finish both at the same time. She mapped everything out for me and signed it, and was like, if it doesn't work out that way, call me. I'll be surprised if it doesn't. And so after that meeting and seeing campus and realizing that I didn't really have any ties to Las Vegas other than that job with the chiropractor that I'd only been at for a couple months, and wasn't super happy because I was starting to see how chiropractors were infringing on scope of practice without even really understanding what it was. That vibe I got with the herbal medicine folks started to kick back in with the chiropractor I worked with, and kind of questioning why he was telling people to read certain books about nutrition or to do certain things. And I was like, you adjust modality, like you adjust the body. You don't give advice on how people eat. And then when I started taking classes, I started to notice it a little bit more, and it started to annoy me. So I had no problems walking away from that. And so I decided that it would work out best if I was in Alabama that summer, so I could start to take summer classes and kind of rip off the Band-Aid with a lot of those chemistry classes. And so, mind you, I had not sat in a classroom for 6 years at that point, 5.5, 6 years. So I arrived in Alabama May of 2010, got my place set up, started taking summer classes in person. And yeah, I was the oldest person in the room. Maybe not entirely for the summer, since there were a lot of non-traditional pre-nursing students that were also taking those same science classes, but people were fascinated with the fact that I had this whole adult life before that and just made this random decision, which they called it random. It wasn't really random to me. This big decision to just get up and move and go back to school and not have a job. I didn't have a job the whole first summer because I didn't really know where I should work or where I could work or what was going to be best for me and manageable. And people just wanted to hear stories about what it's like in Vegas, and that got old real fast. And so I took a full class load. I was taking the minimum that I needed for financial aid for my graduate degree, and then squeezing in as much of the DVD classes as I could, and just dedicated myself to it. I got a part-time job. The first part-time job I got was doing research. It was doing research with the social science behavioral research group, calling people on the phone and asking them if they want to take a survey, that sort of thing. And then after a while, I was asked to review survey instruments. I actually studied survey instruments in business school. And so surveys were really, really interesting to me. Hindsight, hilarious, because that's what I do. So all the seeds were like sort of planted a long time ago, and they were slowly starting to come to fruition, so to speak. And so I had a lot more exposure to survey development, design, and how it would work, and telephone format, those sorts of things. And then in 2011, I started working with Bryant-Denny Stadium, Crimson Tide Hospitality, working with Alabama football on game days and throughout the season with hospitality related things. I remember when I interviewed for that job, they were like, "Where did you come from? Like, I was qualified to sit in their chairs." So the people interviewing me for these stadium jobs. And so I was quickly promoted within the Bryant-Denny in the football realm up to a management intern position to run one of the areas of Bryant-Denny Stadium during football season the following 2.5 years. And so was doing those two part-time jobs and managing it. So like when I look back on it, yeah, it was a lot, but there was never a time where I stopped and was like, this all can't happen. It was nice. The job that I had collecting data for those research studies was that once I finished a phone call, I didn't have to dial the phone again for like a couple of minutes. So you could read while you were working. You could watch videos. At the time, we didn't really have as sophisticated of online learning as we do now, but I could get homework done and work on assignments and study while I was doing that job. And it was after school hours. It was after like 4 or 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock that I was at that job. And then the stadium, it was only a couple of days a week, and then on Saturdays. And then when I progressed from football into basketball and gymnastics, a lot of that was on nights and weekends. And then the same thing with softball, late afternoons and weekends. And so I was just managing it. So one thing I will admit, hindsight, that I didn't do as a student, and it didn't really seem to matter, was I didn't really volunteer anywhere, and I didn't shadow any dietitians, and I did not obtain any nutrition experience as a student. No one ever told me I had to. They just were like, focus on school, do your thing, work. No one ever, in the way that I stress with my students now, no one ever did that for me. And so it wasn't defined as a criteria that was needed to apply for the internship, the coordinated program that's at Alabama. It was more focused on the classwork, how well you're doing in the classroom, and what your potential is as an intern, that sort of thing. Kind of, we'll teach you everything, so you don't really have to bring experience to the table. Little did I know, without ever shadowing or going into a hospital, anything like that, I had so many transferable skills from my entire past career. I didn't even know or realize that at the time, to be able to like really talk about them really well. Hindsight, like my personal statement would have been 100 times better than it really was. And so I applied to their coordinated program. I didn't get in the first time. I was not let in the first time. They were on the fence between myself and another student. And it came down to the fact that I had a little bit of an attitude problem in the classroom. And what didn't help was that I was the same age as a lot of the grad students, the PhD students who were teaching some of the undergrad classes. And I think in my mind, I guess I thought it was okay to call them out when they were wrong, or to demand that they explain why they did something incorrectly. And so I made them feel uncomfortable, and they kind of had a little bit of a voice in the decision-making process of that internship at the time. And so they were like, Erin needs another, couple months to like show the faculty that she isn't what these grad students are saying she is, because there weren't many that knew me. There were a few that did not know me at all. And so they were taking what these grad students were saying at face value, and they're like, wow, this person sounds awful if that's how they talk to you. And the others couldn't combat that, saying like, okay, you must be mistaken, or that's maybe not how it went down. Like they were just kind of like, okay, like we can't really defend you if they're saying no. Like the real big decision makers are trusting what the grad students are saying, and we're saying no. And so I remember getting that phone call to let me know that I didn't get in, and it was explained to me what happened. And I was pissed. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, I was really mad about it. And I remember at the time that director telling me, well, you've been through worse, almost making a reference to the fact that I had been sick in the past. And I was like, wow, you just really compared this to having cancer. Okay, that's cool, whatever. And so I took the fact that I was pissed off and actually kind of went through all the stages of grief, and returned in the spring semester with the attitude of like, I don't need you. I don't need this place. I don't need to become a dietitian. I'm just going to finish my master's. I'm going to take the DTR exam, which at that time you had to have a master's to take the DTR exam. Now that's been moved down to the undergrad level. But at that time I saw that as an option. I'm like, oh, at least I can get a credential out of this. I will just take my master's. I will go back to Las Vegas and I will figure it out. If all those people were practicing herbal medicine, without licenses and without I can do it too. That's kind of how I looked at it. And it took me a little while. Remember, my main mentor in the grad program was like, yeah, I understand you're pissed right now. This will pass. Like, don't overlook the opportunity to apply again. Do everything they said, really get to know the faculty members that don't know you. And so it took a little while. It took a couple of weeks. And then I decided, okay, it's probably best just to try again. I'll be here. I might as well apply. And I did everything that I could to not like suck up to the faculty, but to really show those faculty that didn't know me that I wasn't a bad person. And I was actually like a really great candidate for the internship. To the point where when the time came to apply again, everybody was like, it's a done deal. Like, there's no way they're not going to let you in. Like, you have done everything they've asked, and that shows a lot of your character and yada yada. And so I started the internship in May of 2012. Started in clinicals first, so that was like beginning of summer. So there was really no break. I had no summer break that year. Oh, I'd always taken summer classes, but now this was like I'm at the hospital all day, doing rotations and going through that. And I remember a little bit, I was a little bit more stressed out than usual during the internship, because the internship does feel like you're managing a third job on top of all the other stuff that you have going on. But still, I was able to manage it with the jobs that I had. How I ever convinced my DI director that I needed game day Fridays off so I could work at the stadium. I remember she came back and was like, well, if your preceptor says it's okay, then I'm okay with it, as long as you make up the hours. And when I think about it, you are working sort of in food service, since there was catering involved. And, that's sort of related to dietetics in some way. I mean, hindsight, like, I don't even know if I made up all those hours, but I'm sure I did. But it was just, I was getting everything that I wanted and needed. Everyone was just like opening doors for me. And I was like, man, okay, so this is all going to work out. And finished everything. Well, actually, I didn't finish everything at the same time, and that's not my fault. I finished my master's on time. I actually did non-thesis research that grew out of a research, like a random research project that I was doing with my mentor and one of the other professors in the department. And we just decided to turn it into a non-thesis master, since I had worked so hard on it up to that point. And doing the research, going through the IRB process, writing all of that myself, doing survey design and development and they saw something in me that I didn't see. They saw my ability to catch on quick to that and to be able to make good decisions and good study design decisions, and my digging into that old toolbox from business school of like survey development and being able to bring that into what we were working on. They all saw that. And I want to say it was maybe like April, no, maybe like late March. They had brought up the idea of, why don't you stay? So-and-so is graduating. Her GA position is opening. Why don't you stay and take her spot? And that's when I just want to go back to being an adult. I'm going to be 30 years old. I don't want to be in school anymore. And they just kind of nodded along, and they're like, yeah, you don't want to go back to being an adult right now. Like, you want this opportunity. And I was like, no, I'll think about it, but probably not. And went back to Brian Denny, went to my office at the stadium and told everybody, like, yeah, I just had this research meeting and they were talking about offering me a spot in the PhD program. And I said no. And someone like popped their head out of their office and they're like, but do you realize that they just offered you a free PhD and they'll pay you? And I was like, wait, what? Like, I honestly did not understand how GA positions worked, because I didn't have one during my master's. I didn't have anything to compare it to. And so I gently sent an email to one of the professors that I was talking with. And she said, when she saw my email that said, I think I need a little bit more information, she chuckled to herself and was like, haha, we got her. Because she knew that if I was sending that email asking for information, that I was interested in some way, shape, or form. And so I ended up applying to the grad school, took my GRE. I didn't study very long because I didn't really have a lot of time. Got maybe like 10 points above what I needed for the grad school, so that wasn't going to be a problem. And finished out my master's in May and had to finish my internship actually in June, because my final rotation was a long-term care rotation and there were not enough facilities and preceptors available for all of us. So since I was staying, it was going to be in the area, they asked me if I could just kind of finish a little bit later, which I was totally fine with, because I just wanted to get my master's done and out of the way and all the paperwork that comes with that. And then I finished and completed my long-term care rotation in June, and I received my verification statement on my 30th birthday, which was pretty cool. And so I actually didn't rush into taking the RD exam. I waited. I think I was planning on maybe taking it over the summer, and then I kept moving the date. So you have like a 2-week window where you can keep moving the date. And I kept moving it, and then moved it to the Saturday of fall break, that fall semester of 2013. And I studied all day. I had been studying a little here and there while trying to manage all these new PhD classes and teaching my own class. So now I had the GA position and was teaching a 1-credit research class that very first semester that I was doing that. And so I utilized fall break and I just like posted up in the engineering library, which was like my favorite place to study, and had my boxes of all of my notes from all of my classes and my flashcards. I didn't do a reading and associates or any sort of review class like that. It was offered to us. There was one that actually Alabama had for us that they gave us a discount on. But the thought of sitting in a classroom for like 8 hours for 2 or 3 days to listen to somebody rehash everything I had learned over the last 3.5 years, and it was going to cost me like $200 or $300, I was like, I am not interested in that. Like, I think I can handle it. I have pretty good study skills. I take tests kind of well. I've made it to this point. I think I'll be fine. And honestly, like, I was slightly jealous of their flashcard packs, but then I found a company that made really awesome flashcards and I was fine with it. So I had my box of flashcards and my boxes of notes. Did not consider digitizing any of that at the time. I just had boxes of notes in bankers boxes in my car. And I would just grab a box and go to the library and study. And so the day I took my exam, my husband, then boyfriend at the time, drove me up to Birmingham, about an hour north of Tuscaloosa. And I took the exam, knocked it out, and then we drove straight to, I passed by like a couple of points, honestly. I'm not getting, who cares what you get on the RD exam as long as you pass. I just remember seeing like the you passed, and I was like, I'm out of here. We drove straight to Gatlinburg, Tennessee to meet up with my parents who happened to be in town for a business conference. And so we were actually able to celebrate that weekend, which was really cool. And then I proceeded to kind of just flow through my PhD program. And I feel like that's a whole nother episode. But looking back on it, looking back at that conversation I recently had with my student, it reminded me of other students throughout the year. So I mean, I'm mind boggled, or it's boggling my mind, that I'm in my 9th year of teaching at the college level, which is just nuts to me. But I feel like I've come in contact with a lot of students over the years that have felt that the process of going to school and becoming a dietitian at times, or maybe the whole time, it feels like it's going at like a snail's pace. It's like, oh, here we go again with another class about this. Here's another science class. Here's another this. And it just seems like it's just not going fast enough. Those traditional undergrads are in a rush to get out into their real world, and the non-traditional, we're in a rush to get back to our adult lives. And sometimes it does feel like you're treading water a little bit. Some of those semesters, depending on the combination of classes that you're taking, can really feel that way. And then depending on your outlook on it. And so I have kind of felt when students really, really were bothered by that, really bothered by the snail's pace of it, they were complaining about it and had such a negative attitude about it that they were missing all of the little things that were going on in those classes and that they were learning. And they were just kind of blindly motioning through their entire dietetics program because they were just longing for the end game. Like, I just want to get out of here and go to my internship or apply for the coordinated program. I just want to get out. I want to go be an RD. I want to go be an adult. Or I want to get back to being an adult. And they long for the credential, but little do they realize everything that they're kind of not paying attention to with as much detail, like enough to do well in classes, but they're not really taking a lot of it to heart because they're so focused on getting out. They're missing all of those little things that make you a really strong dietitian. So yeah, you will get the credentials someday, but you might look back and not remember a lot of things that you learned along the way. All of those little things you just weren't paying attention to. And so it's hard to tell somebody when they feel things are moving really slow that, hey, you're missing these things. Like, open your eyes, you're missing things. It's very hard to tell somebody that because if they're in that mindset, they're in that mindset. You know, they literally feel like they're watching paint dry. And when someone's watching paint dry, they get kind of bored. And so it's really hard to kind of explain that to somebody because there's nothing maybe you can say to make it not feel like they're watching paint dry. All right, so here's my advice, because trust me, I've been there. Be present in the moment, trust the process, start to really pay attention and pick up on all those little nuances that are going on around you in your classes, with your classmates, and all of the things that you're doing outside of the classroom, in the community, and really start to enjoy things. It might feel like you're treading water. It might feel sluggish at times, but that's all part of going back to school or being in school. There's no rush to become adult, and there's no rush to go back to being one. The only thing you need to worry about is becoming a successful dietitian and getting that credential. Because the time will come when you want to watch paint dry, because that paint's going to be in your new apartment, your new house, or you'll be doing some random fun hobby you picked up in between being an awesome dietitian in your day job. So for me, I'm going to take these homecoming props in hopes of taking home another first place trophy in the What the Hey contest, hopefully for the 3rd year in a row for the LSU Student Nutrition and Dietetics Association. And don't forget, as always, to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode with another awesome dietetic internship or with me, just kind of telling you my side of things. I hope you enjoyed this one. Leave us some great feedback, and we'll see you next time.